This entire year, I've been asked what roguelikes I'm the most excited for. We're currently in a position where the genre is getting more games than I'll ever be able to play in my entire life. So I definitely have to be selective with what I download, or I won't ever have another productive minute again. Fortunately, I'm a roguelike guy, and I do roguelike content, so technically, it's not procrastinating no matter how many hours I sink into a roguelike per week. But of every roguelike I've played, there has been one specific game that has made me excited since I've heard of it and tried it a couple months ago. Not just because it has deep mechanics, insane loot, and a banger aesthetic, but also because it is one of the hardest roguelikes that I have ever played in my life. This may sound like an exaggeration, but I'm not kidding in the slightest. Battle Shapers is a masterpiece that'll leave your head spinning and your bones broken. They reached out to me a couple months ago to make content on their game, and I wasn't even able to beat it once. So I decided to take a break for it and excitedly wait until it was out of early access. If I was going to try to defeat Battle Shapers, I was gonna have to beat it at its best. And honey, that day has come. Metric Empire messaged me again and told me that 1.0 was about to release on December 4th, which is when I realized exactly what I had to do. I had to go back into the battle and shape myself a W. Before I explain exactly how that went, I want to give a massive shout out to Metric Empire for sponsoring another video and giving me another chance to play this masterpiece early. Now, normally when I do these videos, I try to do a 3-run challenge, allowing myself 3 attempts to beat the game or walk away with my tail tucked between my legs. And this video is no different. Kind of. This game is deep. Okay, really deep. The game has more layers working together than a gosh darned baklava. Explaining all 3 runs would be nearly impossible to do so correctly, so instead, I'm going to set the stage. My first run, I did a lot better than I thought I would, getting all the way to the 3rd boss while regaining my bearings on how the systems in this game worked. Unfortunately, I still died on the 3rd boss because Volt Colossus is a monster. My second run, I played like an ape and died at the 2nd boss for not targeting the correct enemy. I know that sounds vague, but I promise you'll understand soon. So on my 3rd and final run, I drank a cup of coffee, locked in, and somehow created one of the most complicated roguelike builds I have ever seen. So sit down and buckle up, because this is going to get really spicy. Our run starts off and I get to choose my primary and my secondary cores. Unlike most roguelikes, Battle Shapers allows the player to basically choose from the pools of upgrades that they want to see in their runs, by selecting a primary and a secondary core. For my primary, I used the Adamant core, which was basically a very defensive playstyle that came with an ability called Outburst, which let me deflect all the bullets that were flying at me. For my secondary, I used the Strike core, which allowed rapid fire and move speed enhancements to spawn in my run. With my 2 main choices selected, it was time to start the run. The first weapon we find is a submachine gun which has vibro on it. Vibro is an element that triggers a slowing sound blast at max stacks. We also found a sound wave thing for our ability. To save some confusion, I'm going to quickly explain what is going on in the HUD. You will always have your main ability, which is whatever primary core you've got equipped, your found ability, which is just an item you find in your run, and 2 guns. Our first actual enhancement is called Fortifying Absorption, which gives us a Fortify stack for every bullet we reflect. These stacks are consumed whenever I'm hit, and they negate damage based on how many there are. Now, an important thing to note about this game is that the set path isn't chosen for you. Instead, you have 3 separate bosses you have to defeat in order to get to the main end, and you can choose which order that you want to face them. The problem? They get stronger based on when you face them. And not by a little bit either. They go from semi-simple easy mode to I wish I brought a metal umbrella to shield me from this rain of bullets mode. I choose to face Volt Colossus first because at level 1 he's kind of manageable, and At level 3, he's a one-way ticket to hell. He's the guy that killed me on my first run from earlier. We find a fire gun, which is probably my favorite element type in the game, and then we find an enhancement which gives me 5% healing after every room. I'm gonna be taking a lot of defensive stuff here because I clearly want to win, so sorry if you see a really cool choice and I decide to choose the one that keeps me breathing. The most important mechanic in this game is your shield. When your shield is injured, you can replenish it by executing enemies that are low with a melee attack, forcing you to play aggressive if you want to stay alive. It's very doom-coded where you can't not be a badass as you play. We continue onward and find an enhancement that gives me 50% bonus damage on precision hits, so as long as I can aim correctly, I'll be doing more damage forever. Unfortunately, I can't aim at all. Now that you're getting your bearings and we're building some steam, I want to explain my favorite mechanic in the game. One of the coolest mechanics I think I've ever seen in a roguelike. Whenever you find a weapon, they come with a perk attached. If you don't want the weapon, you can either recycle it for money, or you can strip the perk off of the weapon and put it into one of your gear slots. So when I swapped out my vibro gun for a machine gun that could stun enemies, I also ripped the perk out of it that made me shoot a fire missile for the last shot of my magazine. And this concept genuinely makes the loot of this game 10 times more exciting, especially because you can have up to 3 perks per weapon slot, and if you upgrade it, it can be more. This also works for your found ability. And as I'm sure you can imagine, building your own weapons as you play leads to some gnarly synergies, which you'll see in this run. We beat up a couple guys and then get an upgrade which gives 20 max shield, which I think is the most important resource in the game. Then we find another upgrade which recharges my dash whenever I kill an enemy, because just like in most bullet hells, mobility is kind of key. We hit up a shop that spawns twice per tower, and find an enhancement that gives me Fortify when I take down foes, and then we head up to our second half of Zone 1. We do an elite challenge, and after we kill him, we get an Echo Blast for our ability. And then we find something that I'm always a sucker for in any game: stacking. It's an enhancement that gives me +1 max health every time I punch execute an enemy, which doesn't sound like a lot when you think about it, especially since a lot of the things in this game can do a bajillion damage, but just you watch. Also, here's where my gears started turning about creating weapons. Last bullet deals shock, last bullet deals pyro missile. Dude, wait a minute. Now my needleator is shooting an insane shock missile at the end. Ooh! We continue on through the tower, and there's a funny little mechanic in this game called retaliations. Basically, at any given moment, the boss can get mad at you and throw a challenge your way. Here, for example, he made it rain shock mines, which was absolutely annoying. Unfortunately for him, I could make it rain too, but instead of mines, it was mine fist. Now I hope you're sitting down because your brain is about to fold. I found a shock rifle that dealt 50% bonus damage on vibrating foes. My found ability applies extra vibration stacks, meaning that because of that perk on my found ability, my shock rifle was just gonna be dealing 50% more damage the entire time. I stripped the pierce perk off of some ass gun that I throw away and keep going. At this point, I was dealing a lot of elemental damage. Also, there are 3 elements in this game. There's pyro, which makes enemies take more damage at max stacks, shock, which makes them do a stunning explosion at max stacks, and vibro, which makes them do a slowing explosion at max stacks. We hit up the shop again, and I get an enhancement that I'm kind of embarrassed about. Yeah, I'll say it, I got an extra life. Okay, I know how hard this game gets, and I was terrified. Is that what you want to hear? Then it was time for our first boss, the Volt Colossus. I think this will be a perfect time to illustrate the difference between a level 1 Volt Colossus and a level 3 Volt Colossus. But as you can tell as I swap them back and forth, it's a pretty severe difference. We get an enhancement that makes me trigger my big outburst deflect wave every time I get hit while fortified. Then we find a perk that makes our build so much crazier. Foes affected by both shock and vibro trigger both effects when either of them reach max stacks. So my green and blue build was about to take this run over. For our next boss, we face Strike Mantis. He's a nightmare to face at any point of the game because of a specific attack that you'll see soon. So I just keep fighting him at level 2 because I'm used to it and he scares me. At this point, there's already so many little things happening in the build. The most impressive unsung hero is that my Fortify is stacking pretty fast. So basically, anytime I get hit, I send out a deflect wave. We don't really find anything worth picking up for a few rooms because my current perks and weapons are pretty strong, but I do find an ability perk that makes my critical hits recharge the ability's cooldown. And if that's not cool enough, we get another perk that makes our outburst always happen twice. So if anyone ever shot me, not only is their next bullet going back at them, but their next bullet. I now have a double outburst happening whenever I press the button or whenever I get hit with Fortify. And then, just for the laughs, I find a perk that makes the last bullet of my machine gun magazine deal vibro damage. So now the last bullet in that submachine gun was hitting you with every element. We finish up the first half of Tower 2, and honestly, I'm really feeling myself, which is a dangerous place to be in roguelikes. But it did almost feel like I had cheat codes on. My damage was really high, but I was also very hard to hurt as well. My Fortify was always stacking, while my outbursts were triggering every few seconds and twice every single time they did. In roguelike terminology, this is called a god run. In fact, I liked my build so much that I was kind of afraid to touch anything, because there were so many little pieces working together that I didn't want a butterfly effect break one branch and destroy an entire forest, so to speak. There was a funny perk I found that made me deal 100% more damage, but it would cost $1 every time I fired, and I ended up not taking it, but it's kind of silly, so I mentioned it. I try a Rift challenge thing, which is this hard-ass room where you gotta win without getting hit 3 times, and I didn't get hit once, because I'm him. Then I find a perk that makes my Echo Soundwave thing apply shock when I use it, alongside another perk that adds a percentage chance for me to regain shield if I take damage to my health. Then it was finally time for Strike Mantis, and this guy is a complete asshole. He has a laser attack where he shoots a laser in a 360 and you have to play lethal jump rope. It's a huge pain in the ass, and to make matters a little bit worse, when he gets lower health, the laser detaches from him and does its own thing, giving you 2 terrifying targets to focus down before you're crushed down for scrap metal and turned into a hubcap for a Ford F-150. We get a perk that allows us to rapid fire bullets whenever we deflect, then another perk that makes it so that our Fortify doesn't get below 1 stack, which means we will always outburst when we get hit. And whenever I outburst and deflect something, I will get rapid fire. I find a fire assault rifle and I decided it was finally time to throw away my jokey avatar machine gun, because that wasn't really anything. Then I get something that makes it so that when enemies are affected by an element, they're more susceptible to get crit. We were now on our second half of the third tower, and this build definitely had me feeling a bit confident. Sure, I was going hyper defensive in just about every choice that I could, but it seems like my weird elementalist build was actually dealing some damage. We get to the shop right before the final boss, and this was exactly as far as I have gotten. Now, we just had to face our third boss, and somehow not die. My build was absolutely insane, with so many failsafes installed that even though I knew what was coming, I still felt kinda good. Wind Magistrate is a demon. He's very fast, so he can reach you from anywhere in a split second. He shoots a ton of tornadoes at you, which not only deal a ton of damage, but also obscure your field of vision because there's just so many of them. And he spawns enemies, which are actually helpful for me to charge my shield, so I like that one. After frying his ass to death, we get a perk that makes our shock cause pyro damage, which then makes the shock stack faster. God, that's like a tongue twister almost. And at this point, I know that I've finally done it. Not only have we gotten further than I've ever been, but I've also become the avatar of robot gun violence. Now, there was only one more boss left. A guy who I have never seen in my life. Like deadass. I don't know what his name is. It's all just question marks. We head into the fourth and final stage, and honestly, I'd be lying if I said I struggled. My damage was just kind of off the charts. Both my guns were basically stacking every element, and I have so many defensive maneuvers, I'm practically unkillable. Remember when I said that every time I executed an enemy, I would get 1 health? Look at my health bar. Is that not nuts? After mowing down a few waves of high-level enemies that would have normally made me terrified, we get to the fourth and final boss, Veros. And now it was time to lock in. Normally when I do the boss fights in these videos, I just kind of show you the footage of the boss fight, but Veros is so hard that I don't think I said a single word the entire time. So I guess you guys can just look at the footage. Buddy, take that. Oh God. Buddy. Buddy. Did I win? Oh my God, I think I won. Oh my God, I think I won. Oh my goodness, I think I won. Oh my God. That was so difficult. That was so difficult. With him defeated, I was ready to pat myself on the back. But right before I started feeling the hint of satisfaction, the game showed me the Phantom Code, aka the new difficulty system they're dropping for 1.0. Basically, when you beat the game, you unlock the ability to add scaling difficulty settings, and in order to get the true ending, you have to beat it on the hardest difficulty. In short, after sweating and losing and failing for hours, the game looked me in my eyes after my first win and said, "Good job beating it on easy mode, bud." Go check out Battle Shapers from my link in the description and you will not regret it. They also have a demo available too, so you can try it out before you buy it. But you are gonna buy it because the game is good. I mean, did you just see all this? It's great. Just want to give one more massive shout out to Metric Empire and Battle Shapers for sponsoring the video and making such an amazing game. It was genuinely such a good time, and I'm glad that I finally have another way to procrastinate. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.